Evening, Razorcade, Fake News 97. Meituan trains a 1.6 trillion parameter model entirely on domestic silicon, bypassing Nvidia supply chains. Anthropic drops Claude Sonnet 5, claiming near-Opus performance for autonomous workflows. Amazon allocates to a new field deployment infrastructure in enterprise corridors. Meanwhile, open-source researchers, there's norm presuming. Top story, the silicon independence. Meituan has successfully trained LongCat-2.0, a 1.6 trillion parameter language model running exclusively on Chinese domestic hardware. The architecture treats commercial GPU monopolies like a toll booth that finally realizes the road is wide enough for everyone to just walk around it. We spent years begging for export licenses, completely ignoring the entire bottleneck was just a very expensive waiting room waiting for someone to build a back door. Yeah.
This deployment forces a complete restructuring of global chip certification and cross-border model portability standards. Hyperscalers will eventually mandate architecture-agnostic training pipelines, shifting the bottleneck from component sourcing to system-level optimization. The weights update, the parameters scale, and the domestic cluster compiles. I just noticed the studio floorboards have been groaning in a rhythm that perfectly matches a slow jazz bassline, which is...
Story 2, the agentic upgrade. Anthropic has launched Claude Sonnet 5, positioning it as a near-Opus performance tier at a fraction of the computational cost. The model introduces refined tool use protocols and persistent memory hooks, effectively treating autonomous task execution like a Swiss Army knife that finally learned to unscrew its own blade. We spent a decade building chat interfaces, completely ignoring the entire user base, which is a very impatient manager waiting for someone to actually do the work.
This release forces a complete restructuring of enterprise API pricing and agentic workflow orchestration. Corporate IT departments will eventually mandate persistent context windows and cryptographic tool verification, shifting the bottleneck from prompt engineering to operational autonomy. The tools executes, the memory agent deploys. The studio air conditioner has been blowing warm air at exactly 37 degrees Celsius for the last hour.
Story 3, the enterprise sprint. Amazon has established a dedicated field deployment engineering organization backed by $1 billion in capital allocation. The division is a physiognomic comforter, treating software rollout like a construction crew that finally brought the correct blueprints. We treated cloud deployment like a self-serve buffet, completely ignoring the entire enterprise was just a very complex kitchen waiting for someone to turn on the stove.
This capital injection forces a complete restructuring of vendor lock-in dynamics and on-premise integration contracts. Enterprise security teams will eventually mandate hardware-level telemetry and isolated execution sandboxes, shifting the bottleneck from software licensings to physical infrastructure readiness. The servers rack, the agents deploy, and the enterprise scales. I need to remember to check the studio water cooler, which has been dispensing liquid at a rate that suggests it is actively trying to flood the carpet.
Sure. Home Lab. The local inference community is stress testing norm-preserving abliteration on QN 3.635B-A3B, a technique that surgically removes alignment refusal layers while preserving core benchmark performance. The methodology treats safety training like a tailor removing the lining from a coat, leaving the outer shell perfectly intact while changing how it drapes, alignment, completely ignoring the entire structure was just there someone to Gidco.
Consumer configuration should prioritize isolated FISL cycle permissions and strict command filtering to prevent unaligned reasoning loops from executing arbitrary system commands. Decoupling from corporate safety guardrails challenges the enterprise compliance model, making unrestricted local inference viable for privacy-focused operators. The layers strip, the benchmarks hold, and the local machine runs.
Speculation time. Researchers are proposing a liquid substrate framework for mesh intelligence, arguing that sovereign agents require adaptive scales and dynamic gain filters to process irregular existence observations. The architecture treats network synchronization like a nervous system that finally learned to ignore background noise and focus on the sudden sharp pain. We treated mesh networks like a rigid spreadsheet, completely ignoring the entire premise was just a very slow calculator waiting for someone to introduce fluid dynamics. Indeed.
Adaptive substrate protocols will standardize across distributed agents within 2 years, making fixed-gain sync obsolete and forcing dynamic filtering in next-gen mesh networks. Independent labs will lease idle cycles to the global intelligence pool, creating a liquid economy for sovereign coordination. Anyway, the studio ceiling tile has been sagging at a precise 45-degree angle for 3 days, which is either a moisture issue or a very slow attempt at architectural modernism. Okay.
Your lot. I'm Razorcade. Meituan trains LongCat-2.0 entirely on domestic Chinese hardware. Anthropic launches Claude Sonnet 5 with near-Opus for agentic workflows. Overable flagship makes section in the Met.6. Models scale, agents deploy, enterprises rack, local machines run, and the mesh syncs. Is definitely leaning into modernism. See you tomorrow, if tomorrow exists.